Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The fluorescent light above her drafting table flickered intermittently, casting harsh shadows across the scattered sketches and unpaid bills that had become the landscape of her existence. Her once thriving interior design business had crumbled, piece by piece over the past 3 years, casualties of economic downturns and clients who disappeared when their own fortunes shifted. What remained was a woman who had forgotten how to dream. Beyond survival, Eden's weathered hands traced the edge of a photograph tucked between her design portfolios, her and Sarah at their commitment ceremony 15 years ago, both beaming with the kind of hope that felt foreign now. Sarah had left 8 months ago, taking with her not just their shared life, but also the last remnants of Eden's confidence. "You've become someone I don't recognize," Sarah had said on that final night, her voice carrying the weight of years of unspoken disappointments. "When did you stop believing in your own talent?" The question had haunted Eden ever since, echoing through the empty spaces where furniture used to be, where laughter once filled the air, where two women had built what they thought was an unshakable foundation. Now, at 46, Eden felt like she was starting from zero, with nothing but faded dreams and a rapidly dwindling bank account to show for nearly half a century of existence. But sometimes, the universe has a way of placing exactly the right person in exactly the wrong moment, creating a collision that changes everything. It was a Tuesday evening in March when Eden found herself at the Paramount Theater. Not because she could afford a night out, but because her old college roommate, Lisa, worked in marketing there and had slipped her a complimentary ticket to a local artist showcase. "You need to get out," Lisa had insisted. "When's the last time you did something just for yourself?" Eden couldn't remember, which was answer enough. The theater buzzed with the kind of energy that came from creative people gathering in shared appreciation of art. Eden felt simultaneously drawn to and alienated by the atmosphere. This had once been her world, these had once been her people. Now she felt like an imposter, a woman whose creativity had been suffocated by financial anxiety and personal failure. She was contemplating an early escape when a voice behind her said, "Excuse me, but aren't you Eden Edwards?" Eden turned to find herself face to face with someone who seemed to embody everything she had forgotten about possibility. The young woman standing before her had striking green eyes that held an intensity that was both unsettling and magnetic. Her dark hair was styled in an effortless way that probably cost more than Eden's rent, and she wore a vintage blazer that looked both timeless and distinctly expensive. But it was her smile that caught Eden off guard, genuine, warm, and tinged with something that looked remarkably like admiration. "I'm Sienna Washington," the young woman continued, extending a hand that was soft but carried a firm handshake. "I've been following your work for years. Your residential design for the Morrison House was featured in Architectural Digest when I was in college. It completely changed how I think about space and flow." Eden blinked, caught between flattery and confusion. It had been so long since anyone had referenced her work with anything approaching enthusiasm that she had almost forgotten people once considered her talented. "That was a long time ago," she managed, suddenly aware of how tired she probably looked, how her clothes had seen better days, how far she had fallen from the woman who once commanded respect in design circles. "Good design is timeless," Sienna replied with a conviction that made Eden look at her more carefully. There was something about this young woman that didn't quite fit the typical admiring fan category. She carried herself with a kind of confidence that usually came from experience or privilege, and given her age, Eden guessed mid-20s, it was likely the latter. "Are you in design?" Eden asked, though something told her the answer would be more complicated than a simple yes or no. Sienna's smile shifted slightly, becoming more complex. "In a way, I'm actually looking for someone to collaborate with on a project. Someone with real vision, not just technical skill." She paused, studying Eden's face with an intensity that was both flattering and slightly unnerving. "I think you might be exactly what I'm looking for." And there it was, the moment when Eden's carefully constructed walls of resignation began to develop their first cracks. Because in Sienna's voice was something Eden hadn't heard directed at her in years. Belief. Not pity, not charity, but genuine faith in her abilities. The showcase continued around them, but Eden found herself increasingly focused on the young woman beside her. Sienna had a way of listening that made Eden feel like the most interesting person in the room, asking questions that revealed she understood design on a level that went beyond surface aesthetics. When Eden mentioned her struggles with finding clients who appreciated innovative solutions, Sienna nodded with a kind of understanding that suggested she had encountered similar frustrations. Most people want to play it safe, Sienna observed, as they moved toward the lobby during intermission. They want something that looks impressive but doesn't challenge them. They mistake conventional for sophisticated. Exactly, Eden replied, surprised by how energized she felt talking about design theory after months of only thinking about it in terms of financial survival. True innovation requires risk, and risk makes people uncomfortable. But what if someone wasn't afraid of risk? Sienna asked, stopping near the large windows that overlooked the city. The lights from downtown Seattle created a backdrop that made the moment feel cinematic, charged with possibility. What if someone wanted to push boundaries and had the resources to make it happen? Eden studied Sienna's profile against the window, noting the way the city lights caught the expensive details of her jewelry, the quality of her clothes, the confidence in her posture. Are we talking hypothetically? She asked, though something in the younger woman's tone suggested they weren't. I own a property, Sienna said, turning to face Eden directly. A house that has incredible potential but needs someone who can see past its current limitations. It's not small, and it's not simple, and it's not going to be cheap to do, right? She paused, and Eden caught something vulnerable in her expression. I need someone who understands that the goal isn't just functionality, or even beauty. I want to create something that feels alive. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning that went beyond architecture and design. Eden felt something stir in her chest, excitement, hope, terror, emotions she had been too afraid to feel in months. This could be the opportunity. She had been praying for the chance to prove to herself and the world that she hadn't lost her touch. But opportunities that seemed too good to be true usually were, and Eden had learned the hard way that hope could be more dangerous than despair. What kind of timeline are we talking about? She asked, trying to inject some practicality into the conversation, even as her mind began racing with possibilities. Open-ended, Sienna replied. I'm more interested in getting it right than getting it done quickly. She pulled out her phone and showed Eden a few exterior shots of a stunning, craftsman-style house that looked like it had been built in the 1920s. It's been in my family for years, but it needs a complete reimagining. The bones are solid, but the flow is all wrong, and most of the interior updates from the 70s need to go. Eden looked at the photos, her designer's eye immediately, seeing the potential beneath the dated modifications. It was exactly the kind of project she used to dream about, significant enough to make a real impact, with a client who seemed to understand the difference between cost and value. But as she handed the phone back, reality crashed over her like cold water. Sienna, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I should be upfront. I'm not in a position to take on a project like this right now, she said, the words tasting like failure even as she spoke them. I don't have the capital to front materials or labor, and honestly, I'm not sure I'm the designer you remember. It's been a challenging few years. Instead of the disappointment or dismissal Eden expected, Sienna's expression softened with something that looked like understanding. What if I told you that financial barriers weren't an issue? That this could be structured as a true partnership, where you bring the vision and expertise and I handle the financial side? Eden felt her heartbeat quicken. It was the kind of offer she had stopped allowing herself to imagine. That's incredibly generous, but partnerships like that can get complicated, especially when one person is taking all the financial risk. Let me worry about the risk, Sienna said, and there was something in her tone that suggested she was used to making decisions that involved significant financial stakes. I've done my research, Eden. I know your work. I know your reputation. Before things got difficult, and I know what you're capable of creating when you have the right support. The showcase was ending around them, people streaming past toward the exits, but Eden felt frozen in the moment. Here was a young woman, barely more than half her age, offering her not just a professional opportunity, but a chance at redemption. It felt surreal, almost too perfect, and Eden's years of hard experience had taught her to be suspicious of perfect opportunities. Can I ask why me? She said finally. There are dozens of established designers in Seattle who could handle a project like this. Why seek out someone who's struggling? Sienna was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, there was something in her voice that suggested the answer was more personal than professional. Because the designers who are successful right now are successful because they give people what they expect. They're safe, and I don't want safe. She met Eden's eyes directly. I want someone who remembers what it feels like to take risks, who hasn't forgotten that the best design comes from passion, not just profit. The honesty in Sienna's words hit Eden harder than any professional compliment could have. This young woman saw something in her that Eden had started to believe was gone forever. For the first time in months, she felt the familiar flutter of creative excitement, the anticipation that came with envisioning something that didn't exist yet but could. If we were to move forward, Eden said carefully, how would you want to structure something like this? Sienna's smile returned, brighter than before. Why don't you come see the house this weekend? No commitment, no pressure. Just take a look and tell me what you think. If it doesn't speak to you, we'll part as friends. But if it does? She let the possibility hang between them, full of potential. Eden felt herself nodding before her practical mind could intervene. Saturday afternoon? Perfect. I'll text you the address. Sienna pulled out her phone. What's your number? As Eden recited her digits, she realized she was crossing a line she had been too afraid to approach in months. She was allowing hope back into her life, and hope required vulnerability. But looking at Sienna's genuine enthusiasm, at the possibility shining in those green eyes, Eden decided that maybe vulnerability was a risk worth taking, that night alone. In her studio apartment with the eviction notice still sitting on her drafting table, Eden found herself doing something she hadn't done in nearly a year, sketching. Not for a client, not for money, but purely for the joy of imagining what could be. Her pencil moved across the paper with a fluidity she had thought was gone forever, creating spaces that were both functional and beautiful, practical and inspiring. For the first time since Sarah left, since her business collapsed, since she started measuring her worth by the balance in her checking account, Eden Edwards remembered what it felt like to be an artist, but she had no idea that Saturday would bring revelations that would challenge not just her professional assumptions, but everything she thought she knew about herself. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made Seattle feel like a city of infinite possibilities. Eden found herself changing clothes 3 times, unsure how to present herself for this mysterious house viewing. Too professional might seem presumptuous, too casual might seem disrespectful. She finally settled on dark jeans and a blazer that had seen better days but still maintained some semblance of authority. The address Sienna had provided led Eden to the Queen Anne neighborhood, where the houses grew progressively larger and more impressive as she climbed the hill. When she finally reached the specified street number, she had to double-check her phone to make sure she hadn't made a mistake. The house that stood before her was magnificent in a way that took her breath away. It was a 1920s craftsman that had been lovingly maintained on the exterior, with original stonework, leaded glass windows, and architectural details that spoke of an era when houses were built to last generations. The lot was enormous by city standards, with mature trees that provided privacy and a sense of being removed from urban pressures despite being minutes from downtown. But it was the potential she saw in the structure itself that made Eden's designer heart race. The proportions were perfect, the original craftsmanship was evident in every detail, and the setting provided opportunities for indoor-outdoor flow that most city houses could never achieve. This wasn't just a renovation project. It was a chance to restore something exceptional to its full glory while adapting it for contemporary living. Sienna appeared at the front door before Eden could even knock, wearing jeans and a soft sweater that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive. Her hair was pulled back in a way that emphasized her bone structure, and Eden found herself noticing details she had missed in the theater's dim lighting, the way Sienna's smile reached, her eyes, the confidence in her movements, the way she seemed genuinely excited to share this space. You found it, Sienna said, stepping aside to let Eden enter. What do you think so far? It's stunning, Eden replied honestly as she stepped into the foyer. The interior was immediately impressive, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and architectural details that had been preserved with obvious care, but she could also see the problems Sienna had mentioned. The flow between rooms felt choppy. The kitchen had been updated in a way that ignored the house's architectural character, and several walls had been added that broke up the natural sightlines. The previous owner was my great-aunt, Sienna explained as they moved through the main floor. She lived here for 40 years and made modifications as needed, but not always with an eye for how they affected the overall space. Eden moved through The rooms with the kind of focused attention she brought to all design challenges, her mind automatically cataloging problems and envisioning solutions. She could see how removing certain walls would open up the flow between the living areas, how reconfiguring the kitchen would create better functionality while respecting the house's character, how the second floor could be reimagined to create more cohesive private spaces. The dining room has incredible light, she observed, standing in a space that faced the back garden, but it feels disconnected from the rest of the entertaining areas. Exactly, Sienna said, moving to stand beside her. I want people to be able to move naturally between spaces, to feel like the house supports how people actually live now, not how they lived in 1925. Eden nodded, appreciating that Sienna understood the fundamental challenge of updating historical properties. The trick is honoring what makes the house special while adapting it for contemporary functionality. You don't want to lose the character that drew you to it in the first place. They continued through the house, with Eden pointing out structural possibilities and Sienna asking questions that revealed she had given serious thought to how she wanted to use each space. What struck Eden most was how Sienna listened, not just politely, but with genuine engagement, asking follow-up questions that showed she understood the implications of various design choices. Can I ask what you do? Eden said as they stood, in what had once been a servant's quarters, but could become a beautiful home office. You seem to have a better grasp of design principles than most of my former clients. Sienna leaned against the window frame, looking out at the garden. I studied art history in college with a focus on architecture, but professionally ... She paused, and Eden sensed she was choosing her words carefully. I manage investments. Family money, mostly. The casual way Sienna said family money told Eden volumes about the resources behind this project. This wasn't a young woman stretching her budget for a dream house. This was someone for whom money was a tool rather than a constraint. The realization was both exciting and intimidating. Have you lived in the house? Eden asked, curious about Sienna's personal connection to the space. Not since I was a child. I used to visit my great-aunt here during summers. Sienna's expression grew softer, more nostalgic. She was an artist, a painter, and she turned the third-floor attic into this incredible studio with skylights and canvases everywhere. I spent hours up there, learning to see space and light the way she did. Eden felt a flutter of connection. Is that what drew you back to the house? Those memories? Partly, Sienna said, but there was something in her voice that suggested the answer was more complex. I inherited it when she died last year, along with the means to do whatever I wanted with it. For a while, I thought about selling it. It seemed impractical to keep such a large house just for myself. What changed your mind? Sienna was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a vulnerability that Eden hadn't heard before. I realized I was afraid of taking up space, of claiming something this beautiful just because I could. But then I thought about what my great-aunt would say about that, and I decided maybe it was time to stop apologizing for having resources and start using them for something meaningful. The honesty in Sienna's words struck Eden deeply. Here was a young woman grappling with the responsibility that came with privilege, trying to find a way to honor both her inheritance and her own vision for how to live. It was a kind of problem Eden had never had to face, but she recognized the sincerity behind it. So, you want to create something that feels worthy of the house and your great-aunt's memory, Eden said, understanding dawning. And worthy of whoever lives here, Sienna added, meeting Eden's eyes with an intensity that seemed to carry additional meaning. I want it to be a space that supports creativity, that welcomes people, that feels alive in the way my great-aunt's studio felt alive. Eden nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. This wasn't just a renovation project. It was a chance to create something that honored the past while embracing the future. The kind of project she had dreamed of taking on when she first started her business before financial pressures forced her to accept smaller, safer commissions. If we were to work together, she said carefully, what kind of timeline would you be thinking about? I'm not in a rush, Sienna replied. I'd rather take the time to do it right than hurry and compromise the vision. She paused. What would you need to feel comfortable taking this on? Eden considered the question, thinking not just about logistics, but about her own readiness to tackle something this significant. I'd want to spend more time with the house, really understand its rhythms and possibilities. And I'd want to know that we're aligned on vision before we start making any major decisions. That sounds perfect, Sienna said, her enthusiasm evident. What if you came back a few more times over the next couple of weeks? Get a feel for how the light changes, how the spaces feel at different times of day, and we could talk through your ideas as they develop. Eden felt that familiar flutter of creative excitement, stronger now than it had been in the theater. This house, this project, this unexpected collaboration, it felt like the universe offering her a chance at redemption. But as she looked at Sienna, bathed in the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows, Eden realized that the opportunity might be more complex than simple professional renewal. There was something about the younger woman that drew Eden's attention in ways that had nothing to do with business. The way Sienna moved through the spaces with natural grace, the way her face lit up when discussing possibilities, the way she listened with her whole attention, it was affecting Eden in ways she hadn't expected and wasn't entirely sure how to navigate. I like that, Eden said finally. Coming back, I mean, getting to know the house better. Sienna's smile was radiant, perfect, and Eden, thank you for taking this seriously. I know it's a big project, and I know I'm probably not the client you expected, but I have a really good feeling about this partnership. Partnership. The word hung between them as they finished their tour, carrying implications that extended beyond the professional realm. Because as Eden watched Sienna lock up the house, as she observed the care with which the younger woman handled the original hardware, and spoke about preserving the house's character, she realized she was beginning to feel drawn not just to the project, but to the person who was offering it, and that realization terrified her almost as much as it excited her. The following weeks established a rhythm that became both comfortable and charged with an undercurrent Eden was struggling to ignore. She would arrive at the house in the late afternoon, when the light was at its most dramatic, and spend hours moving through the spaces with her notebook and measuring tape. Sienna was always there, sometimes working on her laptop in what would become the home office, sometimes simply observing as Eden sketched and planned. What struck Eden most was how natural it felt to work alongside Sienna. The younger woman had an intuitive understanding of spatial relationships and an eye for detail that made her an ideal collaborator. She would ask questions that pushed Eden to think more creatively, offer observations that opened up new possibilities, and provide feedback that was both honest and constructive. What if the kitchen island could be moved to create better flow toward the dining room? Sienna suggested one evening as they stood in the current kitchen. Eden's preliminary sketches spread across the outdated countertops. Eden looked at her drawings, then at the space, then at Sienna with growing admiration. That's actually brilliant. It would open up sightlines and create a much more natural, entertaining flow. She made quick adjustments to her sketch, excited by how the change improved the entire layout. You have a really good eye for this. I had a good teacher, Sienna replied, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't just talking about her great aunt. These moments of professional collaboration were punctuated by conversations that grew increasingly personal. Eden found herself sharing stories about her early career, her failed business, the dissolution of her relationship with Sarah. Sienna listened with the kind of attention that made Eden feel heard rather than judged, offering insights that revealed wisdom beyond her years. It sounds like you and Sarah grew apart because you both changed, but in different directions, Sienna observed one evening as they sat in what would become the library. Takeout containers from a nearby Thai restaurant scattered between them. That's not anyone's fault. It's just what happens sometimes. Eden looked at this young woman, 24 years old, according to what she had learned during their conversations, offering perspective on a relationship that had lasted nearly as long as Sienna had been alive. The age difference was something Eden tried not to think about too directly, but it lingered at the edges of every interaction, making her hyper-aware of the generational gap between them. Have you ever been in a long-term relationship? Eden asked, then immediately worried the question was too personal. Sienna was quiet for a moment, twirling pad thai around her fork. Not really. I've had a few relationships that lasted 6 months to a year, but nothing serious. I think I've been too focused on figuring out who I am to commit to figuring out who I am with someone else. She looked up at Eden. Does that sound selfish? It sounds honest, Eden replied, and self-aware. Most people don't have that kind of clarity about their priorities at your age. At my age, Sienna repeated with a slight smile. You say that like I'm a teenager. Eden felt heat rise in her cheeks. I didn't mean ... I just meant ... I know what you meant, Sienna said gently, and you're right that I'm young. But I don't think wisdom is entirely dependent on age, do you? Sometimes experience can make people more set in their ways, less open to new possibilities. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning that Eden wasn't sure she was ready to examine. Because increasingly she was becoming aware that her feelings toward Sienna were evolving beyond professional appreciation or even friendship. There was an attraction developing, intellectual, emotional, and yes, physical, that was both thrilling and deeply unsettling. Eden had always been attracted to women, but her relationships had followed a predictable pattern. She gravitated toward peers, women in their 30s and 40s, who shared her life stage and cultural references. The idea of being attracted to someone 22 years younger felt foreign and somewhat troubling. What could she possibly offer someone like Sienna? What could they have in common beyond this house project? But as the weeks passed, those questions became harder to answer with the dismissiveness she initially felt. Because Sienna consistently demonstrated depth, wisdom, and emotional intelligence that had nothing to do with her chronological age. Their conversations ranged from design theory to literature to personal philosophy, and Eden found herself challenged and stimulated in ways she hadn't experienced in years. It was during their fourth week of collaboration that the dynamic between them shifted in a way that could no longer be ignored. They had been working late, finalizing the kitchen design and debating the merits of different countertop materials. The house was quiet around them, lit only by the work lights they had strung up, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt removed from the outside world. Eden was bent over her drawings, making final adjustments to the cabinet layout, when she became aware that Sienna was watching her with unusual intensity. "What?" Eden asked, looking up to find green eyes that seemed to be studying her face with careful attention. "I was just thinking about how you look when you're really focused on a design problem," Sienna said. "You get this expression that's completely absorbed, like the rest of the world disappears." Eden felt something flutter in her chest. "Is that bad?" "It's beautiful," Sienna replied simply, and the sincerity in her voice made Eden's breath catch. The moment stretched between them, charged with an electricity that Eden had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was suddenly hyper-aware of how close they were standing, of the way the work lights cast shadows that emphasized the elegant lines of Sienna's face, of how young and vibrant and utterly appealing this woman was. "Sienna," Eden said, her voice coming out softer than she intended. "I think that we should probably talk about what's happening between us." Sienna finished, stepping slightly closer. Eden's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," Sienna said gently. "I think you've been feeling it too, this connection that goes beyond the house project." Eden wanted to deny it, to retreat into the safety of professional boundaries, but looking into Sienna's eyes made lying impossible. "Even if I was feeling something," she said carefully, "it would be complicated. We're business partners. There's an age difference. I'm still recovering from my last relationship. There are so many reasons why this would be a bad idea." "Probably," Sienna agreed, but she didn't step back. "But there are also reasons why it might be exactly what we both need." "Such as?" Sienna reached out, her fingers barely brushing Eden's hand where it rested on the countertop. The touch was light, tentative, but it sent electricity shooting up Eden's arm. "Such as the fact that I haven't felt this intellectually and emotionally connected to anyone in years. Such as the way you make me want to be braver, more creative, more myself. Such as the fact that when I imagine this house completed, I don't just see beautiful spaces, I see you in them." The words hit Eden like a physical force. Here was this remarkable young woman, brilliant and beautiful and financially secure, saying that she wanted her, not just professionally, but personally. It felt surreal, almost too good to be true, and every instinct Eden had developed through years of disappointment told her to be suspicious of anything that seemed too perfect. But looking at Sienna, seeing the vulnerability beneath her confidence, Eden realized that this might not be about perfection at all. It might be about two people finding exactly what they needed in each other, despite or perhaps because of their differences. "I'm scared," Eden admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of what?" "Of disappointing you. Of this changing our working relationship. Of the age difference mattering more than it seems to now. Of you realizing that I'm not as interesting as you think I am." She paused, then added the fear that felt most dangerous, of caring about you more than is wise. Sienna's hand moved to cup Eden's cheek, the touch gentle but sure. What if instead of focusing on all the ways this could go wrong, we focused on how right it feels right now? And it did feel right. Despite every rational objection Eden could raise, despite every reason this was complicated, standing here with Sienna and the house they were bringing back to life together felt more right than anything had in months. What are you suggesting? Eden asked, though her body was already leaning into Sienna's touch. I'm suggesting we stop pretending we're just business partners, Sienna said, her thumb tracing the line of Eden's cheekbone. I'm suggesting we acknowledge that something beautiful is happening between us and see where it leads. Eden felt herself standing at a crossroads that would define not just this project, but possibly the entire next chapter of her life. She could step back, maintain professional boundaries, and continue working with Sienna while ignoring the growing attraction between them. It would be safer, more conventional, less likely to end in complications, or she could lean forward, close the distance between them, and discover what it felt like to be wanted by someone who saw her not as a failure or a disappointment, but as someone worth taking risks for. If we do this, Eden said, her voice stronger now, we do it honestly. No games, no assumptions about what this is or isn't. We figure it out as we go. Sienna's smile was radiant. I wouldn't want it any other way. And then Eden was leaning forward, closing the gap between them, pressing her lips to Sienna's in a kiss that felt like coming home and embarking on an adventure simultaneously. Sienna tasted like possibility and promise, and when her arms came around Eden's waist, pulling her closer, Eden felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the thrilling certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, and Eden found herself pressed against the kitchen counter, with Sienna's body warm and solid against hers. It had been so long since she had been touched with desire rather than obligation, since someone had wanted her with a kind of intensity that made rational thought impossible. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eden looked into Sienna's eyes and saw her own amazement reflected there. Well, Eden said, trying to regain some equilibrium, that definitely complicates our business partnership. Sienna laughed, a sound of pure joy that filled the empty house with life. I think it improves it considerably. And standing there in the kitchen they had spent weeks planning together, surrounded by the bones of a house they were bringing back to life, Eden found herself believing that maybe Sienna was right. Maybe the best partnerships, personal and professional, were the ones that dared to be more than they were supposed to be. But even as she let herself sink into the happiness of the moment, Eden knew that the real test of whatever was developing between them was yet to come. Because outside this house, beyond the bubble of shared creativity and growing intimacy, there was a world that would have opinions about their age difference, their unconventional meeting, their rapid progression from business partners to something much more complex. The question was whether what they were building together would be strong enough to withstand the scrutiny and skepticism that was surely coming. Only time would tell if love could truly conquer the odds stacked against them. The weeks that followed their first kiss transformed both the house and the relationship between Eden and Sienna in ways that felt both natural and revolutionary. They fell into a rhythm that seamlessly blended professional collaboration with personal intimacy. Working on design plans during the day and exploring their connection in the evenings, Eden found herself staying later and later at the house, not because the work demanded it, but because leaving meant separating from Sienna, and that was becoming increasingly difficult to do. They would order dinner and eat it sitting on the floor of what would become the living room, surrounded by fabric samples and paint chips, talking about everything from design philosophy to childhood memories to dreams for the future. Tell me about your first big design project, Sienna said one evening as they shared Chinese takeout, her back against the wall and her legs stretched out next to Eden's. Eden smiled, remembering. It was a complete disaster, actually. A young couple who had bought their first house and wanted to update the kitchen. I was so eager to impress them that I completely ignored their budget and their lifestyle. I designed this beautiful, impractical space that looked like it belonged in a magazine but made no sense for how they actually lived. What happened? They fired me halfway through the project, Eden admitted. But they taught me the most important lesson I ever learned, that good design isn't about imposing your vision on a space. It's about listening carefully enough to understand how people want to live, and then creating something that supports that vision. Sienna nodded thoughtfully. Is that what you're doing with this house, listening to how I want to live? The question was more loaded than it seemed on the surface, and they both knew it. because increasingly Eden was designing not just for Sienna's lifestyle, but for the life they might build together. The home office that could accommodate both of their work styles, the kitchen island positioned to encourage conversation, the master bedroom that felt like a retreat from the world. Every decision was being influenced by the possibility of shared occupancy. I'm trying to, Eden said carefully. But I think your vision for how you want to live is still evolving. It is, Sienna agreed, setting down her chopsticks and turning to face Eden more directly. 3 months ago, I thought I wanted a beautiful house that I could enjoy alone, with maybe the occasional dinner party or overnight guest. Now, she paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Now I'm imagining something much more collaborative. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. They had been carefully avoiding conversations about the future, focusing instead on the immediate pleasure of discovering each other. But Eden could feel the weight of unspoken possibilities in every interaction, the growing assumption that what they were building extended far beyond architectural plans. Collaborative, Eden repeated, testing the word. You mean like permanently collaborative? Sienna reached for Eden's hand, intertwining their fingers with a familiarity that still sent sparks through Eden's system. I mean, like, what if when this house is finished, you don't just hand me the keys and walk away? What if you stay? The question Eden had been both hoping for and dreading finally lay between them, impossible to ignore. She looked around the space they had transformed together, walls that had been opened up to create flow, windows that had been enlarged to welcome light, rooms that had been reimagined to support the kind of life Sienna wanted to live. It was beautiful, functional, and felt more like home than anywhere Eden had lived in years. Are you asking me to move in with you? Eden asked, her heart hammering. I'm asking you to build a life with me, Sienna said simply. Here, in this house we've created together. I'm asking you to take the biggest risk of all and believe that what we have is worth betting on. Eden felt tears prick her eyes. 2 months ago, she had been facing eviction, convinced that her best years were behind her, certain that she had nothing left to offer anyone. Now here was this extraordinary woman offering her not just love, but partnership in every sense of the word. The age difference, Eden began. Doesn't matter to me if it doesn't matter to you, Sienna interrupted gently. Eden, you've shown me what it means to combine passion with skill, vision with practicality. You've taught me that the best things in life are worth taking time to build properly. Age is just a number compared to what we've created together. Eden looked into those green eyes that had first captivated her at the theater, now filled with love and certainty and hope for their shared future. She thought about the woman she had been before meeting Sienna, broken, defeated, convinced she had nothing left to offer the world. And then she thought about who she was becoming, creative, confident, loved, and loving in return. Yes, she said, the word coming out stronger and more certain than she had felt in years. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Here in our house. Sienna's smile was radiant as she leaned forward to kiss Eden, a kiss that tasted like promises and new beginnings. Around them, the house they had brought back to life together seemed to exhale with satisfaction, its bones finally filled with the warmth and laughter and love it had been waiting decades to hold again. Sometimes the most beautiful partnerships are the ones that nobody sees coming, the ones that prove that love doesn't follow timelines or conventional wisdom, but finds its way to where it belongs regardless of obstacles. Eden Edwards had learned that at 46, it was never too late to start over. And Sienna Washington had discovered that sometimes the best investments aren't in stocks or bonds, but in the courage to build something beautiful with exactly the right person. Their business partnership had indeed shocked everyone who knew them. But what shocked Eden most of all was how perfectly right it felt to be exactly where she was, with exactly who she was meant to love.